Good evening from Los Angeles. I'm Tavis Smiley. Tonight a conversation about the seismic shift in Congress as Republicans take over both the House and the Senate in the aftermath of last week's midterm elections. We got an assessment of what this means for the country and President Obama's final 2 years in office. First from Reince Priebus, the chairman of the Republican National Committee, and then with veteran journalist Ron Brownstein, who's now the editorial director for strategic partnerships for Atlantic Media. We're glad you've joined us. Those conversations coming up right now.
And by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
The election last week that resulted in the Republican takeover of both the House and the Senate signals a new agenda in Washington. Here to set the table for what the Republicans have in mind for the country is the chairman of the RNC, Reince Priebus. He now joins us from Washington. Mr. Chairman, good to have you on this program.
Hey, thank you, Tavis. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Let me start by asking what it is that you heard. What did your party hear the country say last week?
Well, if you don't mind, I think there are three things, and I'll keep it short. Number one, people were not satisfied with the direction that the president and his lieutenants were taking this country, and so those bills and those pieces of legislation were rejected. The second thing was people in the states were satisfied with many of the Republican reformers out there like Scott Walker and people like Rick Scott and others. But the last thing is the piece that I think people also said that they wanted some things to get done in Washington, and they wanted the president, they wanted Republicans, they wanted everybody here to start getting some reasonable things done for the good of this country. And so all of that together, I think, sent a pretty broad message last Tuesday.
What does the party define as reasonable things to get done that are reasonable?
For one thing, I mean, simple things like pass a budget. And I think you need, to get the House and the Senate together to pass a budget. Obviously, when it gets to Ways and Means and Appropriations, you're going to need the president. But first thing, pass a budget. Second thing, I think you can look at Keystone Pipeline. I think that those are, that's a bill that a lot of Democrats support. I think the president wants to support it. I'm not sure, what the holdup was. I think Tom Steyer and some other things came into play. I think that's a measure that we can get done. I think trade agreements are some places that the president and the Republican Party can agree to. But I think it's really important for the leadership in the House and the Senate, John Boehner, Mitch McConnell, and others, to say, here are 3 or 4 things that are achievable, that are reasonable, that are generally liked by the American people, to show that it was worth the gamble to go with the Republican Party across the board on Tuesday. I think that's important.
So God help us if it took the results of last Tuesday for our leaders, so-called leaders in Washington, to know that the American people want them to work together on reasonable legislation. It can't be that it had to take that kind of seismic shift for the leaders to at least fundamentally understand that we send them to Washington to work together, which raises this question. If there are 3 or 4 pieces of legislation that Republicans now believe that they can work with the White House on, why didn't they believe that before Election Day?
Well, I think we did. I mean, we had 360 bills sitting in Harry Reid's desk, and I just want to make sure it's very clear. A lot of those bills, and I'm guessing, but I'm pretty close, about 50 of those bills were actually drafted by Democrats in the House and also supported by Republicans. Tavis, most of the bills that we're talking about working with the president on were passed by a 2/3 majority in the House. Harry Reid, and I know it's easy to set up these villains, but Harry Reid was the person that didn't want to vote on any of those bills because he didn't want to put any of his members in a position to have to defend one of those votes in this upcoming election. I think what you're going to see now is the president should come down to the Hill, sit down and look through those 360 bills and say, here are the 40, 50, or 60 of these bills that we're willing to work with you on, and I think you're going to see people wanting to get it done.
I think the American people watching this, with all due respect, Mr. Chairman, are having a hard time trying to juxtapose these two things. I hear the point that you're making, but I think the general consensus is that there's been more collaboration across the aisles in the Senate than in the House. The House has been much more stern, much more stalwart in their beliefs about what they will and won't do than has been the case in the Senate. But you seem to suggest that it's the Senate where all the problems have arisen, as opposed to the House, where they've been much more recalcitrant.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I'm saying, Tavis. And, you know, obviously, I think it took some time to get that message out. But if you look at the production, I mean, if you just look at the production of reforms that have been passed through both chambers, what you will see is that almost the 90% of everything that's actually been accomplished over the last 2 years has come out of the House, and a lot of that wasn't just Republican support. I mean, look at me. We're talking about education reform. We're talking about school choice. We're talking about things that would reform the job training, the Skills Act. Those things came out of the House, and they're sitting in the Senate. I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but the number of votes that Harry Reid has allowed on the floor of the Senate is at a modern time historic low, by far, like not even close. And so I think that was something that did play out across the country, Tavis, but it played out in Iowa and Colorado and North Carolina, maybe not nationwide, but the people that voted on Tuesday knew that a lot of the obstruction that was going on in Washington was coming out of the Senate. And they also knew they didn't like some of the things that came out of the Senate, like Obamacare and the stimulus bill, and they rejected it. So, look, I understand that it takes two to tango. However, I think that it's time now for the president to work with the House and the Senate, and I think starting with those 360 bills, I think you're going to see some progress.
Why should I believe that Mitch McConnell, as majority leader in the Senate, will have any easier a time hurting conservative cats, shall we say, than John Boehner has had in the House?
Well, but look at, you say John Boehner in the House, but that's where all the production came from. I mean, that's where the bills were coming from. And again, I go back to what I said before. Many of these bills, Tavis, 50 or 60, were drafted by Democrats, and they came out of the House. Almost two-thirds of all the bills sitting on Harry Reid's desk were passed by a two-thirds majority of the Congress. So, either what I'm saying is true or I'm lying, and I don't think I'm lying.
No,
so
I'm not
suggesting
yeah,
is Mitch McConnell.
I'm not calling you a liar. What I'm saying.
I know you're not.
Yeah.
I know you're not.
What I'm asking is a question that is fairly obvious, I think, to most Americans, which is that John Boehner has had a great deal of difficulty. I don't need to enumerate it for you. You're the chairman. He's had a great deal of difficulty in the House because a particular wing of his party has given him a very difficult time. And all I'm asking is, with the Ted Cruzes and others in the Senate, how do you believe that Mitch McConnell will have an easier time of trying to get unity amongst your party in the Senate, even though you now hold the majority? That's my question.
Well, I think you get unity by focusing in on a few simple things first. And I think they're things that everyone can agree to. And I think you build a team by one base hit at a time and one first down at a time. And I think if you look at it that way, as opposed to going for, a Hail Mary or a Grand Slam, I think that's how you build a team. And I think people do believe that we can get enough cooperation, both within our own party and across the board, to get a budget done, to get Keystone Pipeline done, and to start the process of actually moving forward with some sensible things that the American people can agree to, including everyone in our own party and some Democrats as well. So, look, proof will be in the pudding, right? So I think that now's the time to get some of this done. I think the first quarter next year will be really important to our country and showing that we're going to make progress in the House and the Senate.
So to the victor goes the spoils. It's abundantly clear that Republicans cleaned Democrats' clocks last week, and yet this is the midterm election, important, but not all-encompassing. That is to say that Democrats didn't do well on Election Day with blacks or Hispanics, quite frankly. As I said weeks before the election, I didn't see how they were going to be inspired to turn out in major numbers, and that turned out to be the case. But Republicans showed absolutely no gains, no inroads made whatsoever with regard to black and brown voters. That might win you the midterms in 2014, but that dog ain't going to hunt come 2016. So what does the party do over the next 2 years to make inroads to Hispanics and African Americans in the most multicultural America ever?
Well, actually, I mean, turnout in the midterm among black and Hispanic voters was almost at an all-time high. So, I mean, actually, it did happen. We won 26% of the black vote in Ohio, 12% in North Carolina. And I know that those aren't huge numbers, but you know what? It's a lot of progress. And across the board, we had one of the biggest turnout operations among black Republican voters that we've had in the history of our party. I'm not suggesting to you that we've solved these problems. What I am telling you is that when you have 26% of the black vote in Ohio and a record number in Michigan and other states, what I'm saying to you is that we're making progress. We need to double down on our engagement efforts. We've got the biggest black and Hispanic engagement effort in the history of our national party, and I think we need to get better. And that means that we need to double and triple down and get our message out to black and Hispanic communities across America. I don't think that we've carpeted the world in 2 years. I agree with you. But I do think that if we can hit numbers like 12, 15, 17% of black voters and 35, 37% of Hispanic voters, Mitt Romney would be president right now. So we're working on it. I think we're making a lot of progress. And I think if you kind of peel back the onion a little bit, Tavis, you'll see that we actually did make historic gains in this midterm as a Republican Party.
So I'll close on this note, Mr. Chairman. How important, then, is it for the Republicans, Mr. Boehner and Mr. McConnell and their members, to show that they can, in fact, lead between now and 2016? And what is the consequence if, for the next 2 years, they don't get anything done? What price will you pay in 2016?
Well, I mean, we'll find out, but I think that John Boehner and Mitch McConnell, they really do believe that it's important to have a simple, achievable agenda that can be accomplished rather quickly to show the American people that what they did was worthwhile and that it would have good, fruitful results. And I think you're going to see them very committed to that endeavor.
Congratulations on your party's victory last week, Mr. Chairman. An honor to have you on the program. I look forward to doing it a few more times between now and November of 2016. Thank you for coming on.
That'd be great. Thank you, Tavis.
Coming up, we'll continue our